So good morning, guys. Welcome to today's training. We're going to talk about the codependent fantasy, specifically the one that says, when they love me, I will finally be whole and worthy. Now, is this a fantasy that you relate to? Is this something that you're like, yeah, I can relate to this. I've seen myself do this. Because, me too. Me too. And like what I have a little description of today's training, but I wanted to make note that doing these things sometimes really triggers my perfectionism. And it's kind of funny how it shows up because it relates directly to this concept of, okay, when they finally love me, when I get them to love me, I will finally be whole and worthy. It's where perfectionism comes from. It's a symptom. It's not actually something that exists in itself. It exists only in this framework of transactional love. So that was creeping up for me today when I was writing this out this morning. So you're not alone if you deal with this. A little performance anxiety, try to get things done, do it right, that kind of thing. So have you ever felt like this? Have you ever struggled with the sense of being worthy, being valuable, being worth it, being worth enough? Because if you have, you've been dealing with the impact of what's called transactional love, the consumer supply relationship, and discard trauma. Now, for me personally, I had a huge fantasy growing up that if I could get the person I was focused on to love and like me, whether it was parents, whether it was a girl, or whether it was a friend, a person I wanted to be my friend, I would then finally be worthy. I would finally be whole. I could finally be myself. And I would chase this fantasy all the time, over and over and over, seeking it, trying to please them, trying to fix them, trying to be the person I thought they wanted to be, trying to be perfect. And what this did is it led me into a nightmare of trying to control people, trying to get rid of myself, trying to avoid difference and trying to be the same. We call that shape-shifting or morphing. But it also led to deep shame, deep self-loathing about who I was as a person. And when I started to emerge out of codependency and really heal, really break free of this, I found that a lot of this originated from three specific factors. Okay, so we have three factors that originated in this particular fantasy, and generally these three factors drive all codependent fantasies, because this isn't the only one. There's like 9 dominant fantasies. So that first one's transactional love. What does that mean to you, transactional love? Because is that even love, right? We grow up in systems, or we grow up in an environment where we're expected to behave a certain way, we're expected to believe certain things or do certain things, or we're going to be punished for it. We learned real quickly the definition of transactional love, because transactional love is love that has to be earned. Something that we have to do X in order to get Y. It's a lot like a transaction. You go to Albertsons, you want a donut, you give them $1, they give you a donut. Well, if you want love, you give them you please their feelings, you make them feel good, they give you love. That would be a transactional relationship right there. And that condition, that experience of transactional love starts shaping our awareness of our value. That our value is one, determinable by another person. So it's determined externally. We become what's called externally oriented. We let other people become the absolute authority over our sense of worth. There's some real power there when we give that to somebody. So transactional love comes into that. And then we're also learning that our value is conditional. It can be pulled up and down. This is why rejection and approval can be devastating or euphoric for a codependent. It's because their sense of worth, their sense of worthiness is yanked up and yanked down by the other person. They've made the other person the authority over their worth. And this is what gets them stuck in this very, very deeply. So that's another signal of transactional love. So anytime you have to earn love, you have to earn affection, time, attention, shelter, safety, care, you're in a transactional system. And this transactional system is a result of what's called the consumer supply relationship. And that's the second factor that drives this fantasy. In the consumer supply relationship, you basically have three things going on. You have the consumer, which is the person getting the supply. You have the transaction, which is the supply itself. And then you have the supplier. That would be the codependent. And so what happens in this is that the consumer has a need. They want something from the supplier. And so they love bomb the supplier. They tell the supply that, hey, you're the best thing ever. You complete me. I've been looking for you all my life. You're the only person that could do this for me. And to the supply, this is euphoric because finally somebody cares. Somebody appreciates them. Somebody's like sees them. It's like, oh God, I'm finally being loved and seen for what I bring to the table. My transactionalism, which they will call worth, is being valued. And this is an extremely euphoric event for the codependent because they've been starving for this all their lives. So they're getting a massive hit of chemistry with oxytocin, serotonin, dopamine. Yeah. So it becomes really euphoric for them. And then once the consumer, the narcissistic person, the abuser, that kind of person, the user, gets their supply, then they start to devalue the supplier, the codependent. And they do this because the codependent's becoming more confident, okay? They're becoming more themselves because they're relaxing. They're like, oh, they love me so I can be myself, okay? And that irritates the consumer because now they're losing control. They're not getting the supply they want from the person, and so they devalue them, they criticize them, they undermine them, they make them question themselves. They gaslight them. And this can go from very covert, like, are you sure? You know, you look good in that dress, but you'd look better if you lost 10 pounds. Kind of covert attacks to overt attacks, like nobody will ever love you. You're lucky I love you. You should be grateful I'm in your life, kind of things. So that's the devalue stage. And then when the consumer is done, they've had enough of this, they want something else, they discard the codependent, and in this discard, the codependent collapses on themselves because they don't know who they are. Their value is completely anchored in the approval and rejection of others. And that's why they feel gutted and emptied and they collapse. This is where they feel deeply abandoned and they feel completely isolated in their life. Very, very important, because that's the second factor in this fantasy is the consumer supply relationship. And the whole goal of codependency is to become what we think the other person wants us to be, so they'll keep us. We're trying to prevent the discard segment or sequence in the consumer supply relationship from happening. This leads to the third factor, and it's called unmatured attachment. Now, as toddlers, as babies, we don't really have a formed conscious identity. We don't know who we are. So what the brain does is it goes out and it seeks feedback from the external world. And the first people it seeks feedback from are the parents. And those parents are giving what's called reflection back to the child about who they see the child as. Now, a child doesn't know what's true and what isn't about itself, so it takes it all in. And if we have a healthy parent, the healthy parent is reflecting back to the child, the joy of the child, the joy the parent feels and the experience and the existence of this child. They're reflecting back to the child the importance of their needs and their time, the child's needs, the child's time, the child's affection, the child's presence. And what this does is it feeds the 10 core needs the child has to help them nurture into their innate identity and innate value or worth. The healthy parent also helps the child begin to identify with their own feelings. So, hey kiddo, how do you feel about that? What do you think about that? What does this mean to you? They help the child form their own connection with their own identity and their own self-awareness. Now, in transactional systems like consumer supply relationships with like narcissistic, avoidant, or even incompetent parents, you're going to end up in a transactional model. You're not going to be reflected what you are to them. You're going to be reflected from them what they want from you. Okay? This is where a child learns how to regulate the parent's feelings. This is where a child learns to meet the needs of the parent. This is where a child learns codependency and loses themselves in it. And what happens in this dynamic is the child is unable to come to a full and concrete sense of self and self-worth because they're constantly in fear of being discarded. And since the brain is in fear of discard, they can't explore who they are. And that means they don't fully develop their own sense of internalized self. See, in the healthy reflection model, the child eventually matures into an adult who knows themselves. They know their limits, they know their likes, their dislikes. They know how to choose healthy people and unhealthy people. They leave things that don't work for them. Rejection and approval are filters for them. They're not defining factors. They're not expressions of their value. They're the ones that are confident in who they are, and they're willing to take risks and discover love for themselves and their own happiness. They're also the ones who know their purpose and out there doing their thing. But those of us that went through this transactional paradigm as a child, we don't really know ourselves because we didn't get sufficient reflection back about the importance of our own feelings, our own boundaries, our own needs, our own wants, our own character. Instead, we were conditioned, we were trained to absorb ourselves or enmesh ourselves with the parent, regulate their feelings and their expectations, and be what they tell us to be. This is why we struggle with our self-value. This is why this is the genesis of this fantasy of when they love me, I can finally be me. And the reason why is because if they love me, then I'm finally safe to be myself. And I can go out and do this. I can do me. This is why it's so euphoric. And this is why we start to grow and change when we're in these relationships. We start to find ourselves. But then, if we are starting to become differentiated, we're starting to be ourselves, and the consumer doesn't like that, that's when they start to devalue ourselves. And we take that as a negative reflection about ourselves, and we start shaming ourselves. This is where we try to become more perfect, more ideal for them, and then we discard ourselves in order to keep them. So that reminds me of the song from, and I just spaced her name, but it's really popular right now. I needed to lose you to love me song. Man, I don't remember. I can see her face. Selena Gomez. That song. Very, very powerful description of what it takes to come back to ourselves. So guys, what do we do if we've been through this transactional system and we don't really know who we are? Well, I've got 4 steps for you here. First one is to start identifying with your own feelings. How do you feel about it? Not how do they feel about it, not how do they feel about you, but how do you feel about them? How do you feel about that situation? Because you're going to notice you have 2 sets of feelings show up. One is your feelings about what they think about you specifically. And the second set is what you think about it or them. The ones you need to really pay attention to is that second set of what you think about the situation or them. Because that's where your voice starts coming through from your value. The second thing you need to do is start identifying the things you like and don't like and validate them, honor them, respect them. Because this starts differentiating yourself from others, and it helps you start finding your own shape, your own tangibility in the world. The third one is to identify healthy people in your life that reflect back to you. You can identify them fairly easily. They celebrate your achievements. They encourage you to go your way and do your thing. They respect your feelings and your boundaries. They have their own boundaries. They respect their own feelings. They have their own goals. And they encourage you to find the same in your life. And the fourth thing you can do is cultivate your innate value by celebrating the fact you exist. And then retrieve your value from outside yourself. Bring it back home and allow yourself to be you. With those 4 steps, you'll start being able to reconstruct who you are, get back home to you, and move forward in your own value, voice, and vision, your own happiness there. So that's it for today's training, guys. I appreciate you. Now, If you want help in these steps, you want to help in breaking free of codependency and getting back into your happiness, then I encourage you to apply for the happiness strategy. This is my 13-week training where I take you through healing your trauma, retrieving and being your innate value, tuning into and listening to your true voice, and following the vision that emerges from that. This 4-step system has consistently resulted in more happiness and love for my clients very, very quickly. Most of my clients see results within 4 weeks and see long-term results spanning the rest of years. Most of them have accomplished this and persistently in their life very, very easily. So if you're interested in that, all you need to do is apply. You can click on the link in the description above or go to apply.freetheself.com. We're very happy to have you in the course. We have a few spots open. We start in just 13 days, so January 20th. So apply and let's get you in there, and so you can have your value, voice, and vision back, and you can also get clarity on your own life, and you can find closure on trauma, because that's the big goal here. So, hi, Sonia. Yes, definitely. Thank you guys again for being here for this training. I'll see you tomorrow in tomorrow's training. You guys have a good and safe day, and remember that you're worth knowing, loving, and keeping. See you tomorrow, guys. Bye-bye.